Well, after a weekend convention in which he lambasted the Conservative Party and its leader in a pre-election style speech, the Prime Minister today spoke with Erin O'Toole ahead of the budget 1 week from now. Trudeau also spoke with Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet to discuss opposition priorities for the Liberal Build Back Better budget and whether he can count on opposition support. He'll speak with the NDP leader and the Green Party leader on Tuesday. Lots riding on the budget, including the possibility of a snap election if it gets voted down in the minority parliament, which seems unlikely at this point. But let's bring in three MPs to talk about the latest pre-budget developments. Rachel Bendayan is a Quebec Liberal MP and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Small Business and International Trade. She was also one of the Liberal Party convention co-chairs this weekend. Good to see you again. Pat Kelly is an Alberta Conservative MP and the Small Business and Western Development critic for the official opposition. And Don Davies is a British Columbia New Democrat MP and his party's health critic. Good to see you all. Rachel Bendayan, let me start with you. Both the Liberals and NDP held their virtual policy conventions this past weekend to adopt some key policies, and some of those policy ideas, including increased childcare spending, green economy measures, they'll likely be advanced in the budget coming up. What does the Prime Minister want from these meetings with opposition leaders?
Well, as you mentioned, Peter, the Prime Minister is reaching out to all party opposition leaders this week, and he spoke to two of them earlier today. I think what we're looking for is to collaborate with our opposition colleagues. We're looking to deliver a budget that will deliver for Canadians, and we need opposition to vote with us on the budget. What we've seen with the Fall Economic Statement and Bill C-14 is that the Conservatives are consistently blocking us, which is delaying necessary funding and supports to Canadians. We hope that doesn't happen again with the budget.
All right, Mr. Kelly, let me hear from you. Your leader, Mr. O'Toole, met with the Prime Minister today to discuss Conservative priorities for the budget. One would think whatever's going to be in the budget is mostly done by now, so I'm not sure he was looking for advice from Mr. O'Toole. But Erin O'Toole specifically spoke against the notion of a universal basic income, which both Liberal and NDP conventions supported this weekend. Doesn't mean we'll see it in the budget, I think. But why do Conservatives oppose that idea and other big-ticket spending plans?
Well, I think now is not the time for grand utopian new types of permanent spending. The whole premise of the aid measures that we have supported so far since the pandemic were to get Canadians safely through the COVID crisis. And we now find ourselves really in a budgetary crisis over debt load, and adding on new permanent spending is just not what the right time for this. I mean, we need to get back to an employment-based economy and get into a rapid recovery of the economy through a transition back to a full employment economy. Not a time for new grand permanent measures.
All right, let me come back to some of that in a moment. Mr. Davies, let me turn to you. Jagmeet Singh will meet with the Prime Minister on Tuesday. I guess I'm wondering what the NDP wants to see in this budget, but also in the context that, you know, are any demands the NDP makes hampered by the fact that Mr. Singh's already said he's not going to let the government fall over the budget. He's going to prop the government up during this pandemic. So do New Democrats have any leverage here?
Well, first of all, I don't think that's what we've said. We didn't say we'd prop up the government no matter what in the pandemic. What we have said is we don't believe it's time to go to the polls right now when so many Canadians are suffering. Look, Peter, Canadian families and workers across this country are suffering. We saw last week the sobering figure of 53% of Canadians are $200 or less a month away from insolvency. So people are really suffering. So this budget, I think the number one priority is obviously to get essential help to people who are really suffering through the COVID crisis. That's unemployed workers, it's small businesses, it's senior students and other marginalized groups. And unlike with respect to my colleague, Mr. Kelly, I think now is exactly the time to start focusing on structural programs like childcare and pharmacare and housing and long-term care reform. You know, there never seems to be a good reason for Conservatives to address these issues, but I think the COVID crisis has revealed in stark terms where these fault lines are in the Canadian economy. Now's the time to recognize them and address them, as well as, of course, the climate crisis, which there's no time to waste in dealing with that. So those things we'll be looking for in the budget.
Rachel Bendayan, we've already heard from various cabinet ministers telling us to expect big spending on childcare, green initiatives to fight climate change, and measures for women. This budget's being billed as one that will spend tens of billions to transform the economy. We've heard from Mr. Davies, Mr. Kelly. Why is this the right time, you think? While people are just trying to get through another wave of the pandemic, why is it time to talk about a transformation of the economy for years to come?
I think that we need to learn the lessons of the previous recession. I mean, if you look at the great financial crisis of 2008 and everything that the IMF has since come out saying as a result, it is about spending and stimulating the economy in order to come back to a full recovery as quickly as possible. The risks of doing too little far outweigh the risks of doing too much. And the federal government knows this. And that is why from the very beginning we said that we would not only be there to support Canadians, to see them through the other side, whether it's with respect to families, supporting families through an increase in the Canada Child Benefit, whether it's the CERB or the many emergency measures that allowed Canadians to continue to pay their rent and put food on their table, or supporting small businesses, a file I obviously care very deeply about. We put in a number of different measures, and we've said that those supports would be there until the end of the pandemic, but we also have to see beyond that. And I think you have in us a government that can chew gum and walk at the same time. I mean, we need to address the pandemic and also ensure that the economy comes roaring back afterwards.
Mr. Kelly, why is your party against that kind of big spending that we've talked about, that hopes to use the pandemic as a springboard to transform the economy? You talked a little while ago about the need to look at a job creation budget. Are those two things mutually exclusive, a transforming of the economy and job creation?
Well, I don't think that first of all, I don't think that that our party would need to take any lessons from really anybody on coming through a great recession. Canada led the world out of, in terms of government response and prudent financial management, to see Canada through the last great financial crisis, and we can do it again. And I think that Canadians are going to be looking for leadership. They're going to be looking for prudent expenditure, and they're going to be looking for a plan that will lead us eventually back to a balanced budget. We're not talking about cutting fundamental programs that Canadians depend upon. We're but concerned that now is exactly the wrong time, though, to continue to pile on debt recklessly as Canada has exceeded all of these measurements for debt. There have been no fiscal anchors. There have been no controls. There has been nothing from this government from the beginning. They squandered the inheritance that they received from the previous government.
For instance, a lot of the experts say, look, you pour money into childcare, it actually is going to make money for the government with more women in the workforce, more revenue, more tax revenue, fewer supports because they're in the workforce. Do you accept that you could actually, with that kind of investment, government revenues can actually increase?
Well, we'll see what they end up proposing, but I don't see. I mean, and there are issues of provincial jurisdiction that you can't just imagine these things into being. Let's see what happens.
Mr. Davies, let me give the final word to yours. Time is tight tonight. Why is it the right time to spend tens of billions of more dollars now to transform this economy?
Well, because Peter, there's spending and then there's investment. And when you invest money in things like childcare, what you do is you get a multiplier effect that unleashes the ability of millions of people, primarily women, to participate more fully in the workforce, which simply adds to Canada's economic progress. Also, things like building housing, having a strong infrastructure spending program in this country, the roads, the bridges, the highways, the ports, those kind of facilities are the basic infrastructure that provides the basis for Canada's economic progress for decades to come. So if you can't invest now when interest rates are near 0% and there's millions of people unemployed and need work, I don't know when you can invest. So I think it's a good time for us to invest in Canada and Canadians.
Brief time we had together tonight. We'll have a chance to revisit this. I know budget coming up a week from today. Thank you all for your time tonight. We'll talk again.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.